America is divided. I don't know if you remember, and honestly, why would you? 11 things have happened since the pandemic implosion, but let's just brush through the socially distanced highlights. Okay, let's get the big dogs out of the way. The President of the United States is serving us pure German circa 1933 realness, honey. The cops murdered George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, and other Black people. And after Americans went toe-to-toe with brutal cops for a few months, our elected officials put on their big boy pants and said, we're gonna fix this right now. And then proceeded to paint murals and wear kente cloths instead of actually changing anything. And the cops are still up to their old tricks. And here we are. America is great again with the highest amount of coronavirus cases in the world, 6 million cases and over 180,000 deaths. USA, USA! And yet another unarmed Black man was gunned down by a villainous cop. And we have to protest again. While the rest of the developed world has slowed the spread of COVID-19 cases, America is divided into 50 little states, all with 50 different methods of treating the coronavirus with no executive oversight or direction. The executive branch is MIA, but if you watch the RNC, Trump is the hero that saved America from the pandemic. Even with the dire coronavirus records, America is completely divided on what's really going on. 76% of Republicans think the Trump administration has handled the pandemic well, while 25% of Democrats think it's been handled well. And despite the trauma and endurance that normally would bring a country together, America is more divided than ever. Okay, maybe not ever, because there was that one time that we had a civil war. But out of 14 developed countries polled, America ranked lowest in country unity following the pandemic. And only 18% of citizens believed America was more united post the pandemic. The consensus on the coronavirus is it only exists if you're a Democrat. Democrats and Republicans cannot agree on the best way to stop the virus or if it even exists. 2020 has basically been like playing the easiest game of would you rather with conservatives, but they have the hardest time answering the questions. You'd ask a softball question like, would you rather make $10 or save 10 people? And they just go, sheesh. I mean, well, they were all gonna die someday of something, right? People are back in school, caught between doing what's good for their mental health and stopping the spread of an infectious disease. Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. Poor people are stuck in between doing that. Rich people are making these cute little pod schools where their kids can be safe and have safe social interaction. Also, when I said poor people earlier, I just want to make it real clear that because of America's systemic oppression of literally everyone who is not a straight, able-bodied, white, Anglo-Saxon Protestant man, those poor people are disproportionately Black and brown. According to a new report by the National Urban League, Black people are twice as likely to die from COVID compared to their white counterparts. The reality of these coronavirus deaths disproportionately affecting Black and brown communities is, it's not an accident. Black suffering and murder has been obvious and prevalent since the dawn of this country. And conservatives don't condone the murder of Black people unless they smoked weed one time or jaywalked or littered. These shootings are nothing new. There's no need to go into the details or harp on the facts. We've known about this issue for years. MLK protested police brutality in the 60s. NWA rapped about it in the 80s. We all know what the problem is. White America lives in an America where they can walk past a crowd of police officers with a loaded AR-15 they just used to murder 2 people. Black Americans live in an America where they can be shot by the police in their homes sleeping at night and shot in the back 7 times in front of their children. White America lives in a world with a threat of protesters and rioters lurking around their suburban corner and will, quote, not be safe in Joe Biden's America. Black America lives in a world where we have to ask the government to stop systemically killing us. I can't even make a joke about this because it's just fucked up. Black lives matter. In school, in hospitals, in their homes, on the street, any and everywhere, Black lives matter.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Political Culture. It's been a pretty hot minute since, we've all last seen each other. Today, we're doing something a little differently. We're going to be combining culture talk with the conversation, talking about what's going on in these here divided states of America with coronavirus and police brutality. And, if we can get a productive conversation, me and Destiny might just be able to take these people's jobs. So, we're on the lookout for a check.
Right. Hey, y'all. It's been a minute. How's everything going? Like, Cody, how's it going in California?
We're doing worse than I expected as California, and somehow still better than half the country. But overall, I'd say we're doing pretty good. Coronavirus is a little out of control because we have so many people, and a lot of the suburban people, aren't really on their grind like that. But I would say overall, it's going pretty well. I know that in New York, y'all been actually kind of turning up a little bit. So how's that been?
We're fine. 10 out of 10. That's why we're the best state. Everyone's kind of free. Everything's fine, I guess. But if you go outside without wearing a mask, everyone looks at you weird. But other than that, we have outdoor dining. Everyone's going back to school. Schools are open, I guess. Yeah, it's fun. People are not dying as much anymore.
Which is great, but I think we all really need to address the elephant in the room that's hanging over really everyone's head right now, the coronavirus. Every state is doing something a little bit different, and there's not really been a universal response on like a federal level or anything on a nationwide level. So specifically, I wanted to ask Dean, how has your state specifically been handling coronavirus? I know you're in Maryland right now with Lindsay.
Hey, what's up, Cody? Yeah, I'm in Rockville, Maryland, and just specific to coronavirus, the state's been pretty on top of it. Governor Hogan has been just circumspect with how he's been treating the entire virus issue. There is a mask mandate. We are required to wear masks, but there is outside dining. Everyone has taken it really seriously, and I've even been to the mall a few times just to see how stores are really operating throughout, and things are pretty safe.
Nice. Which I know is very, very different than to how things have been going in Florida, right, Nigel? Like, can you tell us a little bit about how like that response has been in a almost completely different world of a state,
So our governor, Ron DeSantis, is pretty much Donald Trump Jr., and he takes all of his cues from the president. So we have had a pretty bad response. The cases are going down, which is a good thing. But as far as a unified response across the state, you don't see that. So each county is having to make its own decisions about whether or not the residents are going to have to wear masks. Each county is having to make their own decisions about whether or not their students are going to be going into in-person classes or virtual classes. So a lot of people are scared. We're not really seeing any direction from our governor. So even though for the past few weeks cases have been declining, people are afraid that, it's going to go back up because the governor is not taking this seriously. There's no real national or state strategy.
Word.
Hey, and Will, you've been kind of traveling around the U.S. since you graduated. But you're in Illinois right now. How's that been?
Yeah, so Governor Pritzker has implemented a mandate for masks at the state level. Even if you're going outside, you have to wear a mask, which I think is the sane and responsible thing to do. I've been in Philadelphia for a short bit of time visiting my girlfriend, and kind of similar story up there as well. I think Philly and New York are all in kind of the same boat in terms of listening to science and implementing things that make sense, such as mask mandates. One thing I will say that surprised me, though, here in Illinois is that there's also indoor seating now at some restaurants. I was driving yesterday and saw a Denny's that said, "Come on in, we have open indoor seating." And about a week ago, my Wi-Fi went out and I had to work on a project, and I was calling different coffee shops trying to figure out where I could go to like steal Wi-Fi. And Starbucks actually is open for indoor seating here in Illinois. So I went to Starbucks and sat in my car, but there were people inside of Starbucks wearing their masks working. So it's I don't know. I think it's a weird scenario where the virus is like worse now perhaps than it even was in March and April, but people are getting back to normalcy when we maybe shouldn't be. So it's a little bit scary in that regard. I'm not really sure what comes next.
Almost like us not treating the problem like it's been completely solved is actually going to end up making it worse, like in the long run for us.
Right.
Yeah. Lindsay, this next question is for you. So how has your state's response to that, the reopening plans, the restrictions, how has that really affected the community, and how has the community responded to that?
I really think it depends just on where you are. In terms of reopening, we're in phase 3. Governor Hogan has left it up to school districts whether they want to open up for the fall or not. And even though he said he won't be bullied by the president to do it, he's encouraging it anyway to open schools, even when I don't think it's safe. I think the response is kind of really dependent on where you are. I know earlier there was a conversation amongst the cast, and we were all saying how, like, in Ocean City, Maryland, people are kind of doing whatever they want, not social distancing, not wearing masks. But where I'm at, I'm in Baltimore County, people are wearing masks. There is indoor seating. People are social distancing for the most part, following the rules. If you walk out without a mask, people are going to look at you crazy. So for the most part, people are listening to the rules, and it really just depends on where you are.
Hey, and Dean, how do you feel like, what can Maryland do to also get a unified response?
I think as far as just Maryland and having a unified response, it really breaks itself down to social class issue. I think the response has been pretty cohesive as far as just the generic groups of people. As you see different sort of microcosms of different social circles, such as the people who are living at the beach or the people who are living in Silver Spring versus the people who are living in Rockville. It really comes down to how they feel it culturally affects them. I think if people were to be more cohesive about it, there would have to be just sort of more of a spread of, it really does come down to that cultural point that I was talking about before. Especially at the beach. I was at Ocean City recently. There are a lot of people on the boardwalk just not wearing masks, being completely close to each other, not wearing masks. Saw people hugging, kissing, just speaking out loud without masks. And so I think it really is that state of mind and where you are sort of in the country, just about how conscious you are with the issue. Because again, like Cody said, those people living on beachfront property seem to be living in a world of their own where they didn't have to comply. But a lot of the businesses around were very strict about masks. So it really depends from person to person, I feel like.
Yeah. Lindsay, do you have anything you want to throw in on that?
Yeah, in terms of like people having, as you said, the privilege of not concerning themselves with COVID if they own beachland and things like that, I feel like a lot of people who are in beach-like areas are choosing to not like wear masks and things like that, when in reality they live in the exact same Maryland that people in the city live in, and they should be taking it just as seriously. And things like that, people in different areas not taking it as seriously as people in other areas, are the reason why we're continuing to have spikes of COVID, having the amount of cases and deaths go down and then go back up, is because people in certain areas are acting like they're living in a different COVID situation than other areas. In reality, it's not good for anyone, and everyone kind of just needs to take it with the same amount of seriousness.
Will, we saw you shaking your head. Like, what do you have to say about the racial and class divide?
I mean, I feel like if it weren't apparent before, it's apparent now that and I think this is going to be a recurring theme as we talk more about this tonight, that there's a tale of two Americas. I mean, there's Black America or minority America, and there's white America. There's the America where you can afford to have masks and choose to yell at someone in a Walmart for having to do it, or you live in a densely populated community. You don't have access to wear masks, but you're still expected to do it. If you don't do it, it's criminalized, and oftentimes you still do. I mean, we see Black people protesting wearing masks, and we see white people protesting not wearing masks. We see, Black people being on the front line, both in the healthcare industry and where we go to get our food and other services. And we have white people not wearing masks, going to those very places and institutions, perhaps spreading coronavirus. We have a world where white people and, affluent Black people can afford to live on the beach and not have to worry about being, densely packed into a certain community. And we have low-income people that can't afford that opportunity. We have a world where, some can benefit from remote learning and have access to stable internet so that their kids don't have to go to school. And we have others where they have to send their kids to school because they have to get back to work because their employer will fire them if they don't. So I think there are, myriad of things that are becoming uncovered for a lot of people that didn't see it before, that kind of relates to this whole idea of a tale of two Americas. And even healthcare is a big thing too. I mean, in a lot of communities, and I was in Philadelphia for a while before coming back here, right outside of Chicago, and just looking at testing, like, where are these tests located? Often, I've had friends, white friends from affluent backgrounds that have said, oh, I went to my doctor, got a test within 24 hours. And, you could go a lot of other places and not get a test back for a week or 2 weeks. So, yeah, I mean, I think the racial and class divide is a huge component of this. And to underscore, like, it is not just racial. I think oftentimes the two are tied, but it certainly is. It's class and race mixed together. And if it wasn't apparent now, I think it's crystal clear for those that want to see it.
Yeah, and kind of on the note of that class divide, that racial divide that we see, there's white America where, the coronavirus is a problem, racial injustice is a problem, but then, there's Black America where we see African Americans and people of color are not only disproportionately affected by the coronavirus, but also by systems of government, systems of enforcement that seek to oppress us. So, like, I really want to start getting into that point about where we are socially in America right now, especially in response to the Black Lives Matter, in response to police brutality, in response to all these movements. With all this, like, Black trauma constantly popping up on our timelines, like, we've seen the Black Lives Matter movement gain so much more support than it has in the past. But what specifically, and anyone can feel free to answer this, but, like, what specifically has your community been doing, for the movement? What have you seen of counter protest to that movement from that white America, from those systems of oppression, And take a moment to think about it if you need, but anyone feel free to answer that.
I think I can chime in. And so I'm originally from Virginia, and the place where I went to school is sort of central Virginia. Not too far from there is Richmond, which was the capital of the Confederacy during the Civil War. I have a lot of friends who go to VCU, which is a university down there, and they've been able to sort of illustrate to me firsthand experiences being in those protests and seeing the counter protests that are coming up. A lot of the times you'll see, whether it's white people or members of the majority, coming up with firearms, coming up with all sorts of curses, counter signs, and just aggressive behavior upon people who are really just fighting for the right to live and to survive as normal Americans. Those same people, my same friends, were able to actually go down and help graffiti on the statue of Robert E. Lee that exists down there in Richmond, Virginia. And so it's really been an impact just seeing how not only the protests have taken form, but the counter protests have come back. It's been really scary. You see a lot of people getting super mad over issues that frankly don't affect them. And it's been a little bit sickening, especially being from that state.
I'm in Maryland, and something that I've been doing is, petitions, donating, trying to stay privy to local politics and get involved. I'm still working with an organization called Black Girls Vote Incorporated, getting people registered to vote, urging people to vote in the next election, reading up on issues, also looking for opportunities to work, for your congressperson or in government. That's something I personally try to do. In terms of counter protesting, I'm from Baltimore County. There's a large Black population in Baltimore County. I mean, it's not just Black, but there's not as much counter protesting. It would be met with a lot of backlash.
Protesters have also been making a lot of demands. So anyone can answer this question, but how have your states been handling those demands if they handle them?
So I know personally in the state of Florida, there have been like protests and demands to defund police and reorganize the budgets around police departments and shuffle them other places. Those demands really have been falling on deaf ears, if I'm going to be honest, here in our state. That's mostly because a lot of people feel like they're moderate as far as the state government and local government. So those demands really haven't been heard. We have, like, for example, here in my city, the mayor decided to hold a forum on race relations, but when people were complaining about, there not being diversity training in our police department, he got a little bit defensive about that. So I think each area in each state is definitely going to have something different. But as far as the demands of the national protests, they've been really falling on deaf ears down in South Florida.
We see that the NBA boycotted and got all the stadiums converted into voting centers. We've seen protesters rallying all year. But what do you think it's going to take? Like, what are the steps? What's that next action that's actually going to end this system of oppression that we as Black people are constantly forced into and forced under? Like, what laws, what systems need to change or be put into place for us to see that change actually happen?
Well, I think for one, the justice system definitely needs to be looked at immediately. And not only the justice system, policing, all sorts of just lawmaking that have been structurally and systemically built against Black people and individuals of color. It's pretty disgusting to live in the United States where, no matter how you speak, no matter how you look, your complexion, as long as you are some form of brown, you're immediately suspect and subjected to some sort of violence, be it direct or indirect. So I think first and foremost, people need to look at our lawmaking and our justice system, which speaks to the position of, go vote November 3rd, 2020. Every single vote matters. It's a form of protest in and of itself. With
movements like defund police, like abolish ICE and all that, like stuff like that, like what do you think that looks like in the modern era, where there are people who, like suburban liberals, who really can't even compose the idea in their mind of defunding the police? So like, what does that look like in America where white people and Black people are not fundamentally experiencing the same reality?
Over the past few months, we've been given a unique opportunity to make demands. Like, I think this stuff happens, and it's not every day that the national spotlight is on racial issues for such a prolonged period of time. And with that spotlight comes an ability to be like, okay, we're listening to you. Like, what do you want? And I think the NBA kind of showed that. They boycott one game, and all of a sudden the entire world wants to know what they demand. And like, one of the tangible things they do is convert some stadiums to polling places, which I think is great, but I certainly don't think that is the degree of the imagination that we should strive for. I mean, that's a given. I don't think Black people should get shot and die for the NBA to say, oh, we could use this, this property to allow people to exercise their constitutional right. I mean, I think that's great, but it, to an extent, should be a given. I think what we need is to reimagine the justice system. I mean, I think it's a travesty to think that we live in a so-called democracy, yet people that are incarcerated can't vote. Once they're out of jail, we make it hard for them to vote, if at all. We allow people that have, been the beneficiaries of the American dream to be the ones that write the rules on how to achieve it. And I think that is the problem with America. I think we allow ourselves to be complicit and be, accepting of little wins here and there, yet we don't realize that the change we need is really at the macro level. We need to reimagine the justice system. We can't allow people to write the rules, benefit from the rules, and then refuse to change the rules when people that have been disadvantaged by the rules demand that there's a more equitable system. So I refuse to say that we live in a democracy. We live in a soon to be democratic country. We don't have a criminal justice system. We have a criminal injustice system. And I think those are some of the things that we have to wrap our head around, because, implementing the Breonna Taylor law in Kentucky is great, and it allows politicians to have something that they can run on, but it's not systematic change. It's putting a Band-Aid on something that shouldn't have even been cut in the first place.
Personally, I think that something that needs to be done. It's funny that you brought up defunding the police, because that's actually what I was going to say. I think defunding the police is a good step to take. I think that in terms of changing the systems of oppression, I just think that's going to be so incredibly difficult to do. Not something that we shouldn't do, but just incredibly difficult, because, to be honest, that's rooted in almost everything that is America. But from healthcare to education, which affects what kind of job you can get, which affects how much money you can have, which affects where you live, which it just impacts so many different things. I just think that it's going to take a lot. I'm talking years, decades, before we actually see an America that I would consider something acceptable. It's just, there are so many different issues. It's literally fabricated in the way this country works. Personally, I like to do research on American history. And something that I found that was interesting to me was that the police kind of evolved from, so policing, it's from a mentality that goes back many years. In the South, policing evolved from slave patrols that enforced slavery laws. And in the North, policing evolved from a way to control a dangerous underclass, according to New York Times, which was mainly minorities. So it's just, it's really a mindset that it's going to take a long time to break down, but still needs to be broken down.
I just want to hop in after what Lindsay said. To make it clear, I support defunding the police, but just from what I'm going to say coming after this, it's going to sound like I don't. But I live in a state where even if my city, let's say my city or my county decided that it was going to pass an ordinance to shift funding away from police to other social programs and things like that. I live in a state where our state legislature prohibits our counties and cities from even being able to make those laws, because our state legislature is just predominantly Republican. So even though I support defunding the police, someone from a state like Florida, someone who wants to represent the state of Florida one day, I have to think about, what are we going to do for Black lives in Florida, where, saying defunding the police is a great idea. I think it would be a great idea, but it's not going to happen, at least not for the foreseeable future. It's not going to happen in cities and counties across the state of Florida. And what I think always happens when you have any type of power and it's unchecked, when there's no sort of check or balance on power, that's when we see abuse. And there are too many police departments across this country who don't have any checks on them. And, people are talking about we need to create citizen advisory boards and things like that. And that deals with the aftermath. But what do we have in the moment while a police officer is stopping me or you on the road? What is there in place to stop that police officer in the moment from doing something crazy and killing one of us? And I think that's what we need to start thinking about. We see oftentimes there are a lot of bystanders in the video and they're always recording, but they don't have the authority to do anything. And I've been telling people, if you think about any major sport in the world, every single major sport has a referee or an umpire who is there to throw up a red card or to say, you're violating the rules, you can't do that. And we don't have that in the United States of America in any type of police department in this country. So I think personally, the United States Department of Justice needs to look at these cities. They need to look at these states where we know the most police brutality and police violence is happening. And they need to send lawyers to those communities. People have a Sixth Amendment right to counsel. People have a Sixth Amendment right to be represented by a lawyer whenever they're facing a criminal prosecution. I want a lawyer to be by my side if I ever get pulled by the police. I want a lawyer to come up to my passenger window, and I want them to say, Nigel, here's what's happening, and here's what your rights are. I want a lawyer, a third-party independent person, to be there to record everything that's happening. I want them to write down everything that's going down. And if that officer starts to violate my civil rights, I don't need a bystander to stop and record the whole situation. I have a lawyer right here who's sent from the federal government to say, officer, you can't do that.
Do we have enough lawyers that can do that, though?
I think we do. I mean, if we have data that can show us where these things are happening, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say we have data that's showing us it's happening predominantly in the South. We don't have to send lawyers to every single city in America. And I know it'll be.
Well, look, I mean, I don't want to cut you off, but like, who would have thought that we would need to send a lawyer to Kenosha, Wisconsin? I could not tell you where that is on a map. So, I mean, like, I agree with the concept of it, but I think my ideal reality, and honestly, we could probably talk about abolition of the police too. I'm sure people have strong feelings on that. But like, my thing is, instead of sending an armed police officer to deal with an altercation or to wake someone up who's in their car at Wendy's, I say we send like a social worker, not necessarily someone with a JD, but someone that is trained in how to respond to certain circumstances and communicate with people, but they just don't need to have a gun. Like, to send a police officer into our schools to deal with bad behavior, into communities to deal with nonviolent domestic problems, or to wake someone up in their car in a Wendy's can only lead to one thing in my mind. And I think one answer is, we need to train police better and do like diversity training and de-escalation, or we just say, hey, bump that. We're not going to put police in circumstances where they even have an opportunity to kill unarmed people. So I like the idea, but I just don't know if like necessarily having attorneys accompany police to these altercations.
I like the idea that you put forth also, but my point is, like, you have to think about where people are. Right. And unfortunately, we don't have too many big cities in Florida. We have Miami, we have Orlando, we have Tampa, we have Jacksonville. And even in those big cities, not all of them are democratically run cities. Not all of them are people filled with progressives who are going to say, we should implement these safeguards. We should, instead of sending an armed officer, let's send a social worker. Let's send a mental health care worker to deal with people. We live in a place where those decisions are automatically just decided on by the state legislature. And for the next foreseeable future, that's where we're going to be making these decisions. So for people who live in those communities, while that's a great idea, unless it comes from the federal government, unless it's coming from, another authority, we're not going to be able to see something like that. And that's the unfortunate truth for people who live in suburban areas and very conservative states.
I wanted to speak on the concept of abolishing the police, because usually once people get into the conversation about defunding the police, abolishing the police is also something that is brought up. And I just think that kind of what Nigel said about how defunding the police is going to be extremely difficult to actually get to happen. I think abolishing the police is just even more difficult. But at the same time, it's kind of a question of, well, what do we do? As Nigel said, people, bystanders can film a police, mistreating someone, and that doesn't do enough. In some places, police wear body cams, and accountability is not enough to deter bad behavior. So some people are kind of at the point where it's just like, maybe we should abolish the police. And I understand why people think that, but I just don't think it's attainable. And then I also think you can't abolish the police without having something set in place, ready to go the minute you decide to make that decision. Because otherwise, if there is nothing in place, we will live in a purge-like state. And I just think that it's a tough conversation, and there's a lot of reform that needs to happen. But I also think that the way I see it on social media is it's as though people think it can happen instantly. And I just think that is something that we kind of have to be real about. It's not going to happen instantly. And I don't think that just because it seems unattainable now that we shouldn't even consider it. I just think that we cannot say abolish the police. And then if someone says, well, what system do you think we should put in place? And then someone has no response. Like that's not an option, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I largely agree with you. Dean, I know you have something to say on it.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to there's a lot of concept behind the police that has to do with power over other people. That's why they're in place. That's why they're outfitted with the tools they have. And I feel like that's a lot of the mentality that they walk forward with which leads them to commit these atrocities without expecting any sort of consequence. I think that speaks directly to gun control as far as the tools they have. Now, whether or not a gun is necessary, I think should be determined by the municipality and by whoever is governing that sort of police station. But I think there does need to be a larger look at, who has a gun. And so I just feel like there should definitely be a larger control on, who has a gun, when they're using a gun. And then on top of that, just the body camera rule, the rules with the numbers on the badges, all of that.
Yeah. We have to actually we have to find people who are suited for these jobs, not just whoever feels that they deserve that power should be able to get it.
Yeah, I think, Cody, that's like a great point. I was talking to a mentor of mine who's a chef and a state rep, and he told me, he said he spent longer in training to become a chef than it takes to become a police officer. And I think that standard blew my mind and is terrifying. You have to go to school and training longer to feed someone and to cook food and be a chef than you do to hold a weapon and be a law enforcement officer. And I think if that doesn't tell you what's messed up with America, then I don't know what will. Yeah.
I just want to throw it back to something that Cody said earlier about Black trauma being on the timeline. The Black community has lost so much within the past year. We even just lost Chadwick Boseman. And I know for me personally, it's very exhausting that sometimes I don't even want to participate in the conversation. So how can we as Black people heal forward?
Personally, I think that's something that I've had to do just this past summer. It's just been a lot. Police brutality is just it's running rampant. It's everywhere. And something, especially as young Black people, that we do it in the morning, we do before we go to bed, we do it all the time, is we stay on social media. And I love social media, but I have to unplug sometimes just for my emotional health, because realistically, these atrocities are happening every day. And because we have social media and media in general, whether it be the news or on our phones, the way we have it, we're seeing it. We're seeing it constantly. It's being poured into us constantly. And sometimes we just have to unplug. On a personal note, that's one way I think that we can keep ourselves together.
I mean, I think personally it's been hard to see myself in a lot of the people that we've lost, either directly or indirectly, whether it's, police brutality and me thinking it could have been me asleep in my car in a Wendy's, or, just the heroes that we've lost, like C.T. Vivian, John Lewis, Chadwick Boseman. I mean, these are all people that I've looked up to and that have been instrumental in how I've thought about the world and how I've kind of moved in this space. And it's hard. I mean, I don't really have a good answer other than I think it's hard to see yourself in that person. And I think that's a unique kind of pain that, white people or other people, may not necessarily be able to experience, because I just feel it differently, and it's hard to figure out how to cope and kind of move past that. And I don't know. I mean, I don't have a great answer other than it's been really hard to turn on the news and look at my phone and see all this loss and death.
I know for me personally, I've been trying to hang out with my friends, my Black friends, more often. It really helps just being around them, because we're all experiencing the same emotions, but we can all enjoy each other's company, because they understand me and I understand them. And we've been going outside more and trying to do things that a lot of Black kids aren't able to do. We went to the woods the other day and just hang out. We've been going on adventures, and that just makes me feel really good, because even though the whole world's against us, we still have each other. So there's that.
I think for me, there's been a lot of hurt almost, there's been a lot of not being able to sleep at night. There's been a lot of anger. There's been a lot of pain. There was a lot of, it's not just me. I have friends I know who I have to worry about who are Black, more recently, I was crying for the past 2 days, half the day, because we lost Chadwick, and that was one of my idols. That was someone I actually emulate it. I did like speech and debate. I was trying to like match this dude's rank when I was in high school, like someone I emulated. So I think dealing with the pain is the only way, I think the way Black people have for a very long time, which is that we take that pain and we push forward in honor of those that we don't have with us anymore. It hurts a lot, which is why you feel a drive, you feel a need to go ahead and push towards that end goal, to go get that change that we were looking for, to go achieve the future that we were looking for, to stand on their shoulders and to see the future that they never got to see, but that they set up for us. And I think it's that power, it's that ability to make that pain turn into change that makes us strong as a people, and that enables us to keep going even when it does feel like the world's crashing around you. It does hurt in your chest. It does hurt to go to sleep. But when it comes down to it, that is why we are so strong. We persevere through everything. We together are strong. We are strong with the memories of those that we've lost. That's what makes us strong. And I think that's why, all of you are great. I think that's why Black people are great. I think that's why I love you all so much, that's, I think, a solid place to leave this conversation off. Thank you guys for joining us here on the Conversation / Culture Talk, the special crossover episode here on Political Culture. Chelsea, feel free to replace them with me and Destiny, because I know you loved us so much because we were so great. And really, thank you guys so much for watching and joining in on this conversation. A lot of really meaningful, impactful things were said. Lots of great nuggets of information, and we will see you next time.
Political culture.